Hi, everyone. Welcome to Kvetchfest. I'm Jen.
And I'm Debbie.
Today, we're going to be exploring the fluid topic of how to get along with people who aren't like you, or how do you have long term relationships with partner or partners and navigate the hurdles of wanting to be understood, wanting to get along with someone who's not you, and also everybody else that's around you in your community. It's really hard to maintain any kind of relationship, friendships, family relationships, romantic relationships. And I think we oftentimes want to be around people who are familiar to us and also want to be around like-minded people. But I'm learning that I'd like to diversify, and I've been wanting to diversify my community. It's so important to hear from others who aren't like us, but also how do we navigate that when things are uncomfortable or we don't agree, or just generally with social media and reality TV when we see things that aren't something we agree with, or how we navigate relationships and how that shapes us, because we learn about relationships based on our families essentially. And yeah, going into adulthood, what that looks like. I'm a big fan of Love is Blind. It has its problematic areas, and I know there's lawsuits and so much stuff behind the scenes that they're trying to keep hidden. I think the goal for that show is kind of cool. I think it's a neat concept. And I know that my mom likes Married at First Sight. I think I watched a few seasons of that too. So I'm a bit familiar. So we're going to dive into some of those topics today. So Mom, how do you feel about, those shows, or what was your inclination to talk about this today?
Well, I think that, first of all, I'm navigating a relatively new marriage at an older age as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
So that's part of it. So when I watch Married at First Sight or Love is Blind, I usually watch from that lens of communication. So that's mostly what I think feel about. You were saying that we were raised with what's familiar to us, then we have to go out into the general population, and we sort of have an expectation that how we were raised is how everybody else was raised, and it's really jarring when we find out that's not true. In
Right.
some ways it can be positive because you may have been raised in a not so great situation and realize that other people were not raised like that, and you can glob on to the more positive ends of how people are raised. But mostly I think it has to do with trying to find people that you can connect with based on your springboard of your family raising. That's what I would say about that. But in terms of the reality TV
Oh,
shows, I'm not a follower of The Bachelor. I'm
yeah.
not a follower of The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, but I'm really interested in, I do watch on TV Indian matchmaking and the Jewish
Oh,
matchmaking.
yeah. Oh, same.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
I'm very interested in how people decide how they want to try to find a mate in a permanent, hopefully permanent relationship or a lifelong relationship, and what goes awry because of that. So specifically, if anybody just finished watching the season 17 Married at First Sight, it was very disappointing. And I don't
Well,
want to give away, maybe I shouldn't give away any spoilers,
sure.
but it was a very disappointing season. And I started to kind of reflect on why this is a problem for people who actually volunteer to sign up, where they go through a battery of in depth questioning to get to know themselves better and to get to know what they want in a spouse. And then they actually start through the process, and it feels like they forgot everything that they went through to get to this process. And I think because for me, as I start thinking about it, I think it's because people think they want to marry themselves.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so initially, when they get involved in a relationship, whether you're just dating with the intent to get married or just to live together or whatever it is, I think that we're looking for somebody who's going to agree with us lockstep. And the real reality of life is that's not going to happen. People
Mm-mm.
may know that intellectually, but emotionally, they just don't seem to be able to
Put that
grab
together.
onto that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
disconnect.
Yeah. I don't often, well, let me say it differently. I do go on to Facebook and Instagram and all those things, of course. The other day, I went on to the MAFS Married at First Sight fan page, and the people on there were just bagging on the experts who put these people together. Now, my feeling is that the producers put things together and the
Hmm.
experts are there to kind of just sound experty
Yeah.
and to help it along. And I'm not sure that the experts really put the two people together, but I think they're given a set of people that can go together and then they might make the final decision. But they were just bagging on the experts. And I sent a comment out in the world, which I don't normally do, that I said, it's not the experts. The cast has very high expectations
Right.
that they're going to meet. These
And it,
individuals have very high expectations that these people are going to meet somebody that are going to meet every single one of the boxes they checked off
yeah.
on their questionnaires.
And it's high
Yes.
stakes. And I also feel like with these shows, people come in with probably high expectations, even if they don't want to have high expectations, because these are folks that have been trying to find someone for a long time, usually. And then you have people who think that matching with someone is the work. And then it's actually the work is doing in the relationship. The work isn't being matched. That's just the initial step. And then you have to then inwardly go into yourself and say, what are things I have to work on? What are the things that my partner is calling me in to explore? Because that's a whole other box of fun stuff, a lot of baggage that we don't think we have until we're in relationship with someone else who's
Yeah.
maybe triggering us.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that the additional part of my statement was that there have been very successful, what essentially, this show is what essentially is an arranged marriage.
Hmm.
And there have been very successful arranged marriages. If you watch Indian matchmaking, you'll find that out. I have friends who were matched with an arrangement
Hmm.
and they've been in a very long-term relationship, almost probably 40 years.
Yeah.
So I think it has something to do with your ability to open yourself up to an experience that's not yours only,
Right.
and to make sure that you are communicating directly with the person in a kind and polite way of the things that you like and you dislike.
I
So
also think, yeah. Oh, well, keep that thought. I just wanted to
yeah.
say that with Love is Blind and with Married at First Sight, I like the Married at First Sight because there's experts and they kind of go through the process with them and offer not therapy, but just a place to sit down and talk about things. But with Love is Blind, I feel like it's just you're thrown together, you pick your person, you get married, or you go through the 3 weeks and then you get married or not. But there's no structure, really. It's like meeting families, seeing the apartments, meeting friends, whatever. But I wish that there was something a little bit more so that folks could have some guidance as they're navigating a new relationship, because so often I find that maybe folks aren't in therapy already, and but they're in this really stressful, high stakes environment where you're trying to cohabitate for 3 weeks before you decide whether you want to continue on with the relationship. And I wish that there was something more like relationship therapists that could guide these folks better on the journey. That's my opinion on that.
I understand that, and I think that's true. I think with Married at First Sight, what really disappoints me is that they see the 8 weeks as the end result. And really, I think the experts are trying to communicate that more and more, that the 8 weeks is just the defining moment in the show. But you're
Mhm.
married legally, and you
Mhm.
can go beyond the 8 weeks and see how things will go. And if you don't want to continue, then you get a divorce in 12 weeks or in a year. But why not pursue something that supposedly psychologically, emotionally, scientifically was supposed to be your match,
Mhm.
and go beyond that?
Mhm.
So before you started talking, I was talking about being direct. So just
Mhm.
a small little thing that started a couple on the wrong foot immediately was when they were getting ready to go on their honeymoon, and they were walking, all the couples were walking with their suitcases down to the plane. And the one woman in the relationship was miffed that the brand new person who's only known her 24 hours didn't realize that she wanted him to handle her suitcase for him. So instead of saying, "Can you handle my suitcase because it's heavy?" she chided him with passive aggressive BS
Mhm.
to make her point known. And this woman is supposedly training to be a therapist. So I was very surprised. I won't say I'm surprised, but I was very disappointed that rather than assume a person who's only known you for one day would
Mhm.
understand that as a man, I'm supposed to do this for you.
Right. Yeah.
And which we also load a lot of shit onto men. Ooh, pardon my S word. But we do that to women too. But I think that if you identify as a woman or identified in the past as a woman, you were socialized to believe that men are magical and they are your prince and they know everything that's going on in your mind. And the reality is that men have no idea what's going on in your mind and perhaps their own mind.
Better said. Yeah.
Yeah. so so not communicating well seems to be the death knell for these
Well, this is what I'm saying. I
couples.
mean, for me personally, that's what I need the most help with, understanding my own emotions and then being able to communicate them outwardly to the people that I care about who I'm talking with. That's so challenging. I don't think I mean, you're a great communicator, Mom, but I feel like my therapist say I'm a great communicator. So maybe it's just all in my head, but I think what happens to me is I get kind of verklempt. I get in my head about things, I get anxious, and then I take a while to process. And so that makes me think I'm not a great communicator, or I end up being passive aggressive when I really just wanted to be direct. But then if I'm being direct, some folks have given me feedback that it comes off mean, things like that. So it's like, it's very hard also to be like socialized female and want to one come off in a way that's direct, responsive, and communicative, but also not come across as mean or nagging or whatever that is. I mean, I hate the word nagging, honestly. I think it is a whole host of misogyny underneath that word, but I struggle with communicating in my personal relationships and standing up for myself and advocating for myself. I mean, I guess both personally and professionally, but I'm working on that. And I think there, in those relationships that we're watching on reality television, it's people come in with their own realities, their own perceptions of how they want things to go, these expectations, and their own cultural backgrounds. And I think there's like a lack of awareness when one is assuming, right? Like sometimes in my own head, I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize I was assuming that. How do I not assume? How do I have the awareness that I'm assuming something and then take action, the appropriate action? So yeah, it is very frustrating watching these couples go through this because you're like, oh, I wouldn't do that. And ooh, why would she talk to him that way? And it's all so convoluted and complicated.
I think that, yes, when I watch these reality shows, I don't see it so much. And I know there's a lot of editing, but I don't see it so much in Love is Blind because somehow when you're not looking at the person and you can't see their reactions, that I think sometimes that makes you able to continue talking without your ego getting bruised in the moment
Yeah.
or
Yeah, I think
without
you're right.
stopping to react to that person's reaction.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like body language plays a huge role in how we perceive a situation. And if I think my partner has rolled their eyes at me, I'm like, oh, what? Why do you not take me seriously? Are you pissed off? Are you getting more angry with me? Like, and then the plot starts to loosen and then it morphs into a whole other argument instead of
Exactly.
yeah.
No, exactly. And so that's what Love is Blind has going for it. I also think it's probably very trying to spend hours talking to more than one person, keeping
Hmm.
track of all that, and then
Yeah.
trying to make a decision based on what they found out about each other during those sessions. They had the reunion show I just watched, and it's nice to see that couples have stayed together
Yeah.
over multiple years and that it does work. Now, they have some successes with Married at First Sight
Hmm.
and with children and everything. And I wonder in the real world what the percentage of arranged marriages have succeeded out of like 100 arranged marriages.
Hmm.
I could look that up. But with Married at First Sight, the initial concept when I first started watching at the very beginning, there was not a lot of interaction with the other couples. And
Hmm.
then I think they thought this is a weird thing. We need to put them together with people who are going through the situation together. But that has created more of a kind of this show, which everybody sort of starts gossiping and finding out things and interceding in each other's relationships. And that's the part that I think is ruining the ability for couples to bond with each other during that 8 weeks.
Right. Then it becomes intentional kind of on the part of producers to create that drama for entertainment value instead of the plot of the show, which for us is relationships and
Right.
not so much the drama.
And I think it's very disappointing because I think that I don't know who they think they're marketing to, but I imagine it's probably 18 to 34. And maybe those people like the drama. But as far as being an older person, I'm seeing it in terms of how do people, these successful couples who have married past the 8 weeks and stayed married, what is it about them that
Mhm.
allows the process to work?
Mhm.
And I really believe it's about opening yourself up to be able to find somebody who's not like you, but essentially has the same maybe values and morals that you do, but might see the world in a different way. And you're willing to go along on that ride with them.
Mhm.
And rather than assume and be passive aggressive, you speak directly and you get through difficult situations coming out on the other side closer than you were before.
Yeah.
To
How
me,
do
that's
you
success.
Yeah, no, I get that. I feel like I'm just thinking about my past relationships and how do you navigate being yourself, being true to yourself? This is a hard thing to kind of comprehend or understand, so I'm struggling to get the question out, but I think it's hard when realities combine because you're trying to suss out what's true for you and what's true for that person. And I I remember in my early 20s and things like that when I was trying to really figure out dating and understanding myself with other people, I would get swayed kind of easily on other people's opinions or other people's perceptions of me and then start to kind of play those roles, or I kind of would lose. Maybe that's part of like learning, of course, yourself in a relationship is you kind of go back and forth on not who you are, but things you like or how you manage things. But that's kind of something I struggle with today. Like if I were to go out and date today, I feel like it would be it's challenging to be true to your values. Or it's not challenging necessarily to be true to your values, but what's challenging is to navigate them authentically for yourself while also getting to know someone else and being able to combine those worlds in a non-toxic way.
Well, yeah, I think that to me, and what I see what's happening on these shows and then in the reality of regular life is people don't know how to park their egos at the door.
Yeah.
And so it's always trying to prove. I know the word always is an absolute, but it's many times trying to prove that you're right and that your stance is the one that we should go by. And that is that. And the truth is that there's a big gray area between right and wrong. And it's not about being right and holding something over your partner's head. It's about coming to some kind of agreement or compromise that works for both people, which is the old
Mhm.
fashioned win win situation.
Yeah.
It's also knowing, which takes time, and that's why they need to go beyond the 8 weeks. It's also finding out what things you can say to your partner that they can handle and understand, and what you can't say to your partner. See,
Oh, that's a big
yeah,
one.
yeah, because when I was growing up, we were told, especially during the 70s, you got to tell it like it is. You gotta just
Mm,
give everything out on the table. You talk about everything because you can't get intimate with a person emotionally if you don't just dump it all onto them.
yeah.
And for the longest time, that's what I thought being real was. If I was being honest and being true to myself, I was saying everything that was on my mind. But the truth is, that's not really okay because you might be demolishing your partner
Yeah, I struggle with
unknowingly.
this. Yeah, I do that. I don't think I intentionally do it, but I want to be transparent, but then how transparent, you know? And then it's like goes into who's going to validate each other's feelings if we're both hurt? Am I going to feel more hurt because my partner didn't validate my feelings, and they're going to feel hurt because I didn't validate theirs because I'm hurt? I don't know what that looks like for people in relationships, but are we always validating each other's feelings when we're both upset with each other? How do you move on from that? Like, that is a tricky place to be in relationships, especially one where you have a lot of respect for each other, but your perceptions of arguments or situations are so different. It's
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it's very difficult. I think I've tried to substitute the word validate for acknowledge.
Okay.
I
How do you
don't
do
know.
that?
Okay, so all I want my partner to do is before they start talking after I've spoken,
Hmm.
to stop for a minute and say, do you acknowledge what I'm saying to you? I would
So
like you to
you're
just,
asking that question to your
yes,
partner? Okay.
yes. Because a lot of times in a discussion, and if it gets a little bit heated, or even if it's just important, the other person will start talking immediately after you said something, as if they didn't
Yeah.
even take a second to process what you had to say.
Hmm.
So I'll say, can you acknowledge what I just said?
Hmm.
Or can you repeat back to me what I just said? Which some people
Mm.
think that's a criticism.
Condescending.
Yes, but it's really a good communication thing. What I hear you saying is, because a lot of times what I say and what my partner hears are like
Two different
two
things.
different things.
Well, yeah. And then on top of that, I get defensive instead of just being open. And then when I start to get defensive, I'm waiting to react or waiting to say my part in the conversation instead of listening to my partner's issue or whatever with me or with their work or whatever it is. So, yeah, it is tricky because things get heated really quickly, or not even argument necessarily, but just emotionally. At least for me, it's like an emotional, like your kind of hair's on it edge, you're like, oh, waiting to kind of defend yourself. And I need to not do that.
Yeah, I think that the only time I feel that I need to defend myself is if the other person has said something which is so unreasonable or out of line from what I was communicating that at that point, I just go, okay, wait, we're not even on the same page. But I think
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do, and I'm going to say the 80-20 rule, I don't always succeed at that, maybe even 75-25, whatever, is not reacting,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
trying not to react and trying to stay calm
Yeah.
because I want to put my energies towards the thing I really want to get across rather than go on the tangents that you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you go on the tangent, then the thing that you are wanting to talk about never gets brought back up again. If you read Dr. Gottman, he'll say that 65% of all arguments never get resolved in a relationship, and I
I
probably
think
agree
that's
with
true.
that. Sometimes you
Yeah.
just need to throw it out and
Mm-hmm.
hash it out a little bit, but maybe there isn't a conclusion, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important that your partner hears you and actually listens. And I think that as human beings, we're so into formulating our response before we've had a chance to actually listen. It's hard to feel that you've been heard.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that on these reality shows, which makes it completely different, is that they're all on camera.
Right.
And so they're trying, I don't think that some people realize the difficulty until they get into the situation of having camera people and producers hanging around them while they're having a relationship.
Yeah.
And this season, for instance, I think that the women were accusing the men of acting differently on camera than off camera. And that has been a situation that has come up throughout the seasons, but not
Yeah.
as much as it has in the last couple of years. And that's where I'm wondering if people are legitimately trying to get onto a show where they get married, or are they
Mm-hmm.
trying to commercialize themselves?
Yeah.
And that is just not fair.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That
That's a huge issue with Love Is Blind cast and community. I think where people just want to become famous or influencers, and maybe their intentions are both things. I don't know, but or their intentions change while they're on the show. But yeah, it seems like there's folks that don't maybe have the best or the most deep intentions for going on the show now
and
that
that
they
was
know
a
how big it is. Yeah. Sorry.
right, and that was a lot different than it was when the show first started because the people were not speaking with other couples. They were on their
Yeah.
own. They didn't live in the same apartment complex. The couples were meant to get together and then find a neutral place to live until the 8 weeks was up and then decide if they were going to get married or not. They didn't have
Mm-hmm.
any communication with basically the outside world except for things that were set up with family and friends occasionally. And they had to figure out their own finances. There was a lot of things that they were doing in the 8 weeks that was like what a real marriage might do or an engagement period might be like.
Right.
And social media wasn't a big influence during those first seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's become a diversion and it's unfortunate, but I don't understand people who come onto a show where they want to be married and then get on Instagram and are trying to and are dating apps.
Right.
I don't really understand this. So my feeling is when I said the expectations are too high earlier, my feeling is that whether you're a male or a female or whatever you identify as on this show, except for the shows out of the country,
I
they
know they
don't
haven't
have.
done queer ones. They
They
haven't
have
done
in
any other.
Australia and in England. The
Oh, they do.
UK
Okay.
has and Australia has.
Okay. The U.S. is
Yes.
just
The
slow.
US is just not going to, probably not going to do that for a while, but maybe they would be more successful if they did.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the couples, there have been successes on the UK couples that are same sex. There's
Mm-hmm.
also been failures just like other couples. So, it's not any different. But in this case, it's male, female. And I just don't understand why you would not put your full energy into something you committed to, number one. And that's just a
Mm-hmm.
value judgment on my part. And also that I almost feel like people feel like partners are a dime a dozen.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I
But
don't like what.
but I don't get that either because these people go on the show who don't have or either not a great history of dating or just a lot of struggle in the dating department. So then it's like, well, is it you or is it them? And it's like they go on the show and they don't want a commitment, and it's like, well, are those the same issues that you're bringing into this situation that you were bringing into past relationships? And most likely, yes. And that's why these things don't work, and it's frustrating because you're
It is
like, just
frustrating. No, it is. I mean, I think the final thing that I said on my comment was instead of pointing your finger at your spouse or well, in this case, it is your spouse or your significant other, point your finger at yourself first.
yeah.
How are you coming across? What is your expectation? Does it really is it manageable for the other person to handle?
Mm-hmm.
And these are younger people who are looking at a life trajectory with the possibility of children or just the possibility of spending a boatload of time together and traveling and working. It's
Mm-hmm.
different than in my age group who get married in in their 60s. The energy level for all of that is not there because we've done that in our past relationships and now
Right.
we're just kind of trying to figure out how to hang out in gently.
Yeah. Hang out gently.
Yeah.
You want an easy, easeful, careen.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
just
Yeah.
gliding along.
Yeah.
I get
Exactly.
that. I think I want that too in a way. I mean, it's like, yeah, I'm in my 30s, but I don't want things. My word for the year is ease. I just want things to be full of ease
Right.
because it's
And
just hard.
yeah, and it seems like these people well, they're on TV, so it's already ratcheted up because of the tension of having booms in your face and people telling you where to go
Yeah,
and what to do. I get that. But at some point you have to have realized that's what it was going to be like.
right.
And I have to get over that.
Yeah,
And I'm going to pretend they're not here. And
yeah,
I'm going to have a decent conversation
yeah.
with my person. I was shocked the other night when I was watching MAF's after party when one of the cast members, his name is Michael, mentioned that he and his wife, which was Chloe, realized that some of the conversations they were going to have when the cameras were gone should wait until the cameras were there so that
Mm,
the audience could understand the nature of their relationship. And I thought to myself, wow, is that conjured?
yeah.
That's
I
like
mean, it is,
curating your relationship
which is
for
so much
max.
of today's relationships is curation
Yes.
for social media and for
Yes.
entertainment value. I know. I wish, I mean, I don't know, maybe
Pardon
this will
me.
just be interesting to me because this is what I'm struggling with right now, but a reality television show of like a Love is Blind situation, but for job interviews.
Oh, there you go.
And then companies could be held accountable with their interview practices. And then also it would maybe help with lowering discrimination. I don't know.
Well, they have right now you do most of the interviewing online, right? You don't get to see a person anyway.
No, it's a video chat. It's a video call.
Oh, is it video?
Unless it's
Oh,
sometimes it'll go like
pardon
a
me.
phone screen, which is over
Oh,
the phone, and then it'll go into a video call if you get further down into the interview pipeline, which is anywhere from phone screen to 6 interviews later.
okay.
Yeah.
Having not ever done that, I didn't know.
That's okay. We're here to
Yeah,
learn.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're probably right. I think Love is Blind because they're living like in a dorm with all these other people
Yeah.
and they're also influencing them.
Well, yeah, and then the added drama of you dated each other in the pods,
Right.
which I mean, it's kind of weird, right? Like, did you really date? I guess you did date, but it's all talking. So, but there's still high emotions because talking brings intimacy, and with intimacy and shared connections, jealousy comes from that. So, yeah, it creates
Hmm.
drama.
Yeah. But I also think that what is really great about Love is Blind and maybe Married at First Sight doesn't quite zero in on it is that your intuition becomes heightened.
Hmm.
And once you get a feeling, once you leave the pods and you're living with that person and you start to intuit things are not what you thought they were, it's
Yeah.
time to listen to that because you knew what the person was saying here and now maybe they're presenting themselves differently here. So on
Do
Love
you
is
think?
Blind, when the
Oh,
woman when the woman's husband was out until 6 o'clock in the morning with the one of the women he had dated in the
yes.
pods.
Oh, wait. So you saw the latest season of Love Is Blind?
Yes, I did.
Okay, me too. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she
Yeah.
said, don't,
What the hell, man? Just be
yeah,
honest. At that point, what are you hiding for?
right.
Like, come
Exactly.
on.
And she knew and she said, I'm out. And
Yeah.
sure enough, who does he bring to the finale? The
The
other
person.
woman.
Yeah.
So she was right
Right.
all along.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go with your gut and you have to
Mm-hmm.
be something that I was not growing up. You have to be so confident in yourself as a person that
Right.
releasing a possibility of relationship is less important than yourself. And that is something I did not have the confidence to do growing up.
Yeah, it's
I
very hard.
It's
Yeah.
very hard.
Especially if you
And
don't have a support system and or people around you that say stay because it's easier or because that's societal expectation.
or
Yeah.
say leave because they know it's not right for you.
Right. Mm-hmm.
This idiom comes to mind. I was taught, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. In other words, if
Mm-hmm.
you got one, you snared one, because that was the language of the time. If a woman snared a man, she could train him into what she wanted him to be.
Ugh, that's gross.
Isn't that gross?
That
And
is.
that's what we heard growing up. And I have a friend now that I used to work with, and she still uses that vernacular. I don't want to give up this now because it took me all this long to train him.
Yeah,
And I know it's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's
sure.
not really that much tongue in cheek. I think that basically in relationships we train each other. And by that I mean
Yeah,
you get
how
to
we want to
know.
be treated.
Right, exactly. And that's okay.
It is okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the only one of the biggest things that makes a relationship work between friends and intimate partners is that you just have to let go of a lot of things.
Yeah, you really do. You really do. It's so,
It's
yeah,
hard,
it is hard.
but
Relationships are not easy.
no, they're not. And my sister said to me one time, she said, sometimes you just have to turn around, roll your eyes, and move on.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
that
Just
doesn't
do
mean
a
you do
fake
it.
scream.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you do it every single time.
Yeah.
It just means that you remind yourself that is this something that's worth getting involved in.
Right. Mhm.
Y-
Mom, would you go on one of these shows?
Before I was married,
Yeah.
if they had had a show in my age bracket at the time,
Yeah.
I may have thought about doing something like that. I mean, after all, I did online dating in my 50s,
Yeah.
and I have to say people are not truthful.
Yeah. No, they're not.
They're not.
They're really not.
String
Yeah.
you along, they tell you things you want to hear, and they break commitments
Yeah.
very easily, and it's disheartening.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think you just have to keep plugging along and know, and I think you have to come to the conclusion, not that you don't know it already, but I'm not perfect, so the person I pick is not going to be perfect either.
Yeah.
And so don't assume and don't expect perfection,
Yeah. Mhm. Did you
you know.
think that when you were on the dating apps in your 50s, were you like, gosh, I wish I had done this earlier? Or were you like, oh, I feel better about being on these apps because I'm older and wiser?
That's a big question because I was essentially single for 20 years.
Yeah.
So the reason I went on dating apps in my 50s is because I thought if I don't do something romantically before I die, that would be a shame. I mean, that's really what I thought. Right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
was inspired by an article I read by a woman who had, when I was, and at that time I was in my probably late 40s, and I read this article, and she was in her 60s, and she too had been single for a very long time. And she basically said in the article, and of course she wrote a book, so a little bit conjured, but and this was before social media, so she wanted to basically have sex before she died.
Yeah.
And so she put out personal ads.
Oh, really?
Before apps, there were personal ads.
What did they
And
say? Do you know?
I don't remember, but basically
Yeah.
something about her being single and wanting to,
Mingle. No.
mingle. Yeah. And she would meet men
Yeah.
in different hotels.
Mhm.
And she did that. And then she wrote a book. But I don't know if she ever actually got married, but I think she did what she wanted to do. So
Mhm.
that always lingered in my mind that I wanted to have some kind of romantic relationship before I croaked. But I just wasn't ready to do that. And then when I got like halfway through my 50s, I'm like, holy smokes, I got to do this.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to do it. And I have to say that I was proud of myself in that when I went out with people, I knew essentially that I could get through the date. I knew I was, unless the guy was dangerous, I
Right.
was not going to leave a date before the end of the date. I didn't think that
Yeah.
was a nice thing to do. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So I saw dates through to the end and would get in my car and go, "Whoof, that thank God that's over. I'm not ever going to do that again with this
Yeah.
person."
Glad that
Right?
was only an hour or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So I think that it was successful in that it boosted my confidence,
Mhm.
but I also was dismayed by the amount of misogyny in men essentially around my age or 10 years older than me in the way they would talk to me.
Yeah.
Things like, well, I guess you're not going to call me back, so I'm just going to forget it when they just texted me 20 minutes before and I'm at work.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Wow.
I know.
Gosh, you
I
just
know.
cannot get away from it.
No, it's like, wow, so apparently you're retired and you're just staring at your phone. I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, so there was stuff like that. Or what do you want for dessert? Well, we're going to have cheesecake and we'll share it. I've known you a half hour. I don't really want to share food with you right now.
No, thank you.
I said, no, thank you. I'm going to have ice cream. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, this is the
Toast.
first date. Yeah, goodbye.
Bye-bye. See you
Just
never.
things. Right, right. Or you get dressed up. I want you to be dressed up and I'm going to come like a schlump.
Oh,
I thought,
that's, oh,
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like, what?
yeah,
I cannot
yeah,
get behind that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. So that was like, okay, come on. You just don't respect yourself, number one. And number
Sure.
two, what am I like? You're just going to turn me around and see me in this outfit that you've requested me to wear, but you came looking like you just came off the tennis court.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating.
Ugh, that's
So
gross.
yeah, it is. So yeah, but that's the funny thing about dating apps. And I will say this quickly, and because we were talking about relationships, and we'll get back to that. But I decided after going through multiple people that I was not going to date a guy that was standing by a sports car was reeling in a fish, was standing by a boat, was on a motorcycle. I mean, there was all these guys positioned themselves so they look very adventurous, and I'm sure some of them are. And
Yeah.
I wound up marrying the person I'm married to based on the fact that his profile picture was standing up and sitting down.
But it wasn't next to like any locks
No,
or
he
a
was by a
bagel.
chair. No. And no, because it was J date. And I asked him later, I said, "Where were you?" Because I tried to blow the picture up. And he
Yeah.
says, "I think I was at the Verizon phone store getting a new phone." And I decided to take my profile pictures.
Oh my God, that's funny.
Yeah. And he was just standing and sitting. And I'm like, yeah, I can get behind this because
Yeah.
I felt like the other thing expectation was I'm going to have to do deep sea diving. I'm going to have to zip line. I'm going to have to get on the back of a motorcycle. I didn't want to, that
Do
wasn't,
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think that was something I was, setting myself up to do, but I could stand
Yeah.
and sit.
Oh yeah. You
Bingo.
could go on a walk.
Yeah. Match made in heaven. So
I feel like this is a whole other podcast or a whole other episode we should do about your
on
dating
one day,
experience.
certainly changes in all the different decades. That's for
Absolutely.
sure. I feel for people in the ones that were on maths, especially not so much the ones that are on Love is Blind. There seemed to be a little bit less drama on that show because they're segregated more. But
Yeah.
I think they just get very confused about
Mm-hmm.
what the goal was.
Yeah.
And on this season, they had something they've never done before, where one of the brides said, "Nah, I'm not into this. I'm going."
Yeah.
And so they matched this guy up with another gal
Yeah.
based on the fact that he said he really, really, really wanted to be married.
And then
And he
he
was almost
really,
40
really,
years
really
old.
didn't.
Yeah. And he really, 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 really couldn't. And I'm like, I don't know what was missing
For him. Yeah.
for him.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Therapy.
Yeah, probably. And he seemed to be in touch with his feelings.
Yeah.
But at the end, he started to talk more without saying a lot.
Yeah. Well, also, I wonder, relationships are really thrown onto us as a society. It's like if you're not with someone, you're less. Like if you're single, you're not having a fulfilling life. If you don't meet someone, you're missing out. It's like I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. I think a lot of people are really happy single. I think that you're a full human, you're a whole human without having another half. Why is that sounding weird? It's just it's not true. And I think that happens to a lot of people with any sort of trajectory that's a little different than what's considered traditional, whether that's not getting married or not being in long-term relationships or not having children. All of that is seen as like, oh, you're doing something different. That's not the norm. Why aren't you just doing the thing that everyone else is doing? And I think it puts a lot of pressure on people to think that they're missing out on something when in reality, maybe they aren't. Or maybe they've already done a lot of the work and thought, well, no, this isn't the path for me. This isn't what I actually want. And maybe in the future, I do want a long term relationship. Or maybe I just want to be not monogamous or polyamorous or whatever it is that floats their boat too, because we are pressed into these boxes based on so many things. I think more people would probably date people at the same time if we worked through our jealousies. But capitalism really restricts us in the amount of people we can navigate at once. You know what I mean? I think that's why people are monogamous a lot of the time is because it's just easier. It really is just easier. I mean, you go home and you have one person to talk to, and that's great. And then you have your friends and you have your family. And it's like capitalism makes you do something all day, and then you go home from that and you're exhausted. You don't have time for dating multiple people. I don't know. I mean, I think part of me is like, well, that could be interesting. But also it's like, because I'm a people person, I love meeting people and all of that. But it's like, whew, it's so hard to like think about having a lot of people in your life in that intimate way or in any sort of like, yeah, it just seems,
Daunting?
yeah,
Well, I think that
daunting.
it is difficult because you have only so much energy that you can put towards things. There's another reality
Yeah.
show called Searching for a Sister Wife. And these are people who want to be polygamists
Yeah.
and who
Which
want to
the
have.
difference between polyamory and polygamy, right,
Oh,
Mom?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I just
Yes.
want to make
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Yes. Totally.
I know you
Totally.
did.
And honestly, I'm not against either one.
Sure.
I think that it could be a really well-oiled machine where people get all the things they want and they get a lot of support if they
I
have
mean, it
children.
takes a village, right? I
It
mean,
does.
but I would like to see more polygamists have several husbands. That's
Me
all I'm
too.
saying.
Me
Yeah.
too. Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, and doing it for not conjured, which we talked about one time on the phone, not conjured up, looking at the Bible and fitting the scripture to your idea of why you're having
Right.
a sister wife. Just let's get real. Just say
Yeah.
why you're doing it. It doesn't have to be
Just-
based on any religious dogma or anything.
Yeah.
I totally don't prescribe to monogamy
Mhm.
in just that way of creating family. And also, I think monogamy is difficult because the socialization, well, not even the socialization of men in general, but just because we're animals. And I don't know that monogamy, I think that we created monogamy, but I don't know
Mhm.
that it's very difficult to maintain for certain people. I'll just
Yeah,
say
I think
that.
so too. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I got the best. I mean, I was shoved into singlehood by not by choice, but I
Mhm.
think it was a really good thing for me because many women, especially women that were born and raised during the time I was, never got to be on their own.
Right.
They went from either high school into a marriage or college into a marriage, and they didn't experience any time to really just focus in on themselves. And after you guys left and went away to college, I think that that time period was when I started to really understand my independence as a single person,
Mhm.
and it was very powerful. So when
Yeah.
I got married, that was a hard adjustment for me to make because I was so used to making all my own decisions, doing everything in the house the way I wanted to do it, having things, having my own time, leaving and coming back and doing my own thing. And now I had to negotiate another person, which I willingly wanted to experience, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like what happens on Married at First Sight. You may think you want marriage, and then you realize you experience it under
Right.
what is not completely realistic way, but and then you realize maybe this is not for me because I enjoyed the fact that I could be by myself. And so that's to me an asset in this relationship where even though we do a lot of things together, I'm able to spend a lot of time on my own and appreciate
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
So I think it's good to go through these different experiences. Not to say that people who've been married forever don't have their independence. Some of them do, and maybe not want it in that same way. And you're absolutely right. We talked on another episode about tracks, and it's unfortunate that people feel sorry for people who
Mhm.
are not married, not mothers, not grandmothers, whatever the thing is,
Right.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And can't just appreciate people on the terms in which they are meeting them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes a successful marriage or any relationship is meet the person where they are and go from there,
Exactly. Yeah.
you
And
know?
then go get a couples therapist because it's very
Sure.
helpful.
Sure. It can be very helpful.